Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben, and today I want to continue our Matrix coverage with an explanation as to why the Oracle tells Neo he's not the one in the first Matrix film. An exploration which will no doubt lead us into further questions about free will and fate, two concepts that the Matrix has a lot to say about. First off, for those new to the film, it tells the story of... This is not happening, guys. You're not getting a summary of this one. Watch the damn film. You've had more than 2 decades to do so. Keanu sacrificed himself for your sins, and you can't even watch his 2-hour film, you bastards. Our first real order of business here is to introduce the Oracle, a sort of omniscient clairvoyant sage, and explain her connection to the One, a being according to Morpheus who possessed the power to manipulate the Matrix in any way he desired.
It was he who freed the first of us, taught us the truth.
This One eventually died, but prophecy dictates that he will eventually return to free the humans trapped within the Matrix and ultimately destroy the simulation and end the war with the machines. Now here's where our task today gets sort of confusing. Eventually we come to learn that actually the One is just another program, but a special one designed to stabilize the Matrix. The One is what's known as an integral anomaly, as in the sum of all anomalies in the Matrix, because whoever the One is comes about when the amount of anomalies in the simulation exceeds a certain threshold and thus threatens the stability of the Matrix. When this happens, the machines select a random human to be born with a special inherent code that ties all of the anomalies in the Matrix to this person. Then, the Oracle is also actually just a sentient program who, as mother of the Matrix, is responsible for leading the One to something known as the Source, aka the central computing core of the machine's network, where this predestined person will reset the Matrix to absolute stability. So this makes things tricky for us, because given this added information that comes post-first Matrix film, we have to decide where to infer both the One and the Oracle's words and actions as products of human psychology, and where to infer their words and actions as products of programming. Or perhaps both these levels of analysis are inextricable. Perhaps humans are no different from artificial programs. With these questions in mind, let's try to explore the Oracle's interaction with the One, in this case the 6th one in the 6th iteration of the Matrix, aka Neo, and subsequent related events in further detail. As we know, in the first Matrix film, Morpheus, believing Neo to be the One, takes him to see the Oracle at her home so that she can portend his future and reveal to him if he's indeed the One or not. And at one point during the conversation, she surprisingly asks Neo if he thinks he's the One.
So, what do you think? Do you think you are the One?
Honestly, I don't know.
She then goes on to say that being the One is like being in love. No one can tell you you're in love. You just know it. Even though this exchange is one of the less discussed quotes in the scene, it's key to me because she's telling him directly that she can't tell him if he's the One or not. She almost hints that being the One is a matter of self-belief, and one comes to believe based on a feeling that emanates from within. And we need to know, is this feeling self-inspired or naturally endowed? And it's hard to really discern the former from the latter because how would we ever tell? In the same way, it's nearly impossible to determine if an action someone takes is an act of free will or determinism. And the Matrix loves this ambivalence and constantly explores it as a central conundrum. And given this theme, here is our fundamental question. Is the Oracle trying to encourage Neo to use his own free will to decide who he wants to be? Or are her words, despite whatever they may be, designed to push Neo down a determined path? Morpheus tells us this about the Oracle.
And she's never wrong.
Try not to think of it in terms of right and wrong. She is a guide, Neo. She can help you to find the path.
So we know the Oracle isn't actually a fortune teller. She's a guide. And the lore informs us that as a program, she's designed to understand human psychology, and so maybe she intends to psychoanalyze Neo and determine if he's capable of being the one or not. Or maybe she's choosing her words carefully based on his psychology and thus intends to influence him to make certain choices this way. Both these possibilities are compatible with free will. However, I'm not sure they're the best interpretations or the fullest interpretation of the Oracle's function, because they both conceive of the Oracle as an anthropomorphic being rather than as a program. You'll notice there's one point at which the Oracle seems to be openly cueing Neo in their conversation, almost leading him to say specific things in response to her statements.
Then you say,
But what?
but you already know what I'm going to tell you.
I'm not the one.
Why does she do this? Well, it's almost like she's trying to make sure that certain words are said in a certain order to produce a specific desired outcome. Perhaps we should not listen to what the Oracle says, but instead only consider what happens to Neo following her interaction with him. Think about what she says next.
Sorry, kid. You got the gift, but it looks like you're waiting for something.
What?
Your next life, maybe.
Maybe she is just simply predicting here. Or maybe she's influencing Neo via suggestion. She speculates that perhaps he's waiting for his next life to be the one. But wait, Neo only becomes the one after dying and coming back to life. Her speculation turns out to be the truth. But to understand this, I think we have to view the Oracle as a program rather than a human here. First off, think about what determinism implies vis-a-vis free will, and how the two can actually both exist in harmony because of the inadequacy of human intellect. Free will is the ability of an individual to act according to his own discretion, free of external force. Determinism, on the other hand, is the concept that events are products of forces beyond one's individual will. To think about how we might determine if an action is the result of the former or the latter, I offer you this example. Imagine a person commits a murder, and in court the prosecutors argue that based on all available evidence, the perpetrator of said crime made the decision to commit the act by his own free will. No one forced him to kill another person. However, the defendant's lawyers claim that actually they can prove that his heinous act is indeed not a product of free will. They then introduce an advanced computer program that can calculate all of the events in physical history that not only preceded their client's crime, but actually compelled it, made it so that the murder was inevitable. Now, for the sake of utility, in the American justice system, this defendant would be declared guilty, despite this specious claim regarding the natural order of his crime. However, if the software works as claimed, then his action is in fact not really of his own making, right? Well, in my view, the Oracle is a version of this program, but forward-looking. Remember, her purpose is to direct Neo to the source where he will reset and stabilize the Matrix. So what the Oracle does as a computer program, I hypothesize, is calculate all of the possible sequences of events that can take place in the simulation unto infinity, or at least up to the threshold of her computing capacity, and she then finds the exact set of events that will lead Neo to reset the Matrix. Or at least that's what she usually does, because in Neo's case she has decided to use him to end the cycle of machine-human war, and so I suspect this time her calculations are designed to lead the one down a path which will end at peace. And she does this by altering Neo's programmed attachment to humanity, an element of coding necessary for him to reset the Matrix, so that he instead develops an attachment to a single individual, that being Trinity. Through Trinity, Neo advances towards peace, rather than towards another reset of the Matrix and perpetuation of war. The Oracle is calculating how to arrive here from her very first meeting with Neo, and probably even long before that. So then, American Ben, is the Oracle not clairvoyant and not adept at psychology? Well, this is where questions of free will and determinism overlap, as well as questions about whether we should interpret the Oracle and the One as humans or programs. The most frequently analyzed moment in the Oracle's scene in the first Matrix is when she predicts that Neo will break a vase in her kitchen.
And don't worry about the vase.
What vase?
Indeed, he knocks the vase over as she warns he would do. And so what allows for this instance of precognition? Is the Oracle clairvoyant? Does she use suggestion based on psychological principles? Or does she simply compute that he will break the vase based on a complex analysis of his preceding actions? Well, I'm not sure all of these aren't the same thing. What is clairvoyance? Well, we say it's a paranormal trait most often, implying that there's some sort of magic behind it. But then define magic. Magic reduced to its prime mover is just a mysterious action or occurrence, something we don't have the science to explain yet. The Oracle's prediction falls within the parameters of that definition because we lack the knowledge as to how she is able to know that Neo is going to break the vase. In other words, perhaps simply being able to calculate the future through a concrete algorithm can be deemed clairvoyance. The Oracle herself insinuates that her statement about the vase is less an act of fortune-telling and more an act of suggestion.
How did you know?
Oh, what's really going to bake your noodle later on is, would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
So she does sort of tell us that she designs her words to influence outcomes. But the reason she's able to is that she's a computer program who can calculate an unfathomable number of potential scenarios and input Neo-psychology and other factors against them in order to determine what will likely unfold. And what if a human brain is able to do this rather than a computer program? Then what's the difference between the two really? Organic versus artificial matter? Hey, everything is made up of components existing in this reality, or in the case of the Matrix, from the Matrix Code. And considering this, we can think of computer programs like the Oracle in a different way. That is, we're all programs, and she's clairvoyant because her brain is profoundly more powerful than that of other humans in the Matrix. Additionally, if she can calculate paths to certain outcomes and act in a way to force their occurrence, then are those who are involved in their happening acting on free will, or are they only victims of fate? And thus we can see why the Matrix espouses an ambivalence between free will and determinism. The distinction between the two isn't as clear as it's often made out to be. It's very easy to conclude that the Oracle herself implies the exclusive existence of free will when she tells Neo that Morpheus is going to try and sacrifice his life for him, and that he'll have to choose between saving Morpheus and saving himself.
One of you is going to die. Which one will be up to you?
She literally tells Neo that he has a choice here. But does he? What ends up happening? Well, Neo decides to save Morpheus, an act which ultimately leads Neo to both die as predicted and ultimately resurrect and recognize himself to in fact be the One.
Morpheus did what he did because he believed that I'm something I'm not.
What?
I'm not the one, Trinity.
And so this is an example of the Oracle's suggestions working in real time. She calculates that in order for him to save Morpheus and thus come to believe himself to be the One so he can ultimately bring peace to humanity, he first needs to believe that he's not the One. And this is why she tells Neo that he's not the One. This is such a brilliant contradiction that the Wachowskis have inserted into their film. On one hand, the Oracle says, Neo, you have free will, my man. And on the other, she influences his outcomes. Therefore, in The Matrix, both free will and determinism are in play through a sort of unsolvable paradox. Neo believes he's making the decision, but the Oracle forces his decision. There's this idea that runs throughout the first Matrix film that what you believe about reality is what is true.
I thought it wasn't real.
Your mind makes it real.
This raises a very difficult question. If a person is absolutely sure that something is real, then how could it not be real? Or better yet, what is then the difference between something that is real and something that is not? After all, the mind is interpreting both in the same way.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. There is no spoon. It is not the spoon that bends. It is only yourself.
You don't try to bend the spoon telekinetically. You simply must believe, or actually you must know, that the spoon is not a spoon. It is something without a set form that is temporarily taking the shape of a spoon. Thus, you bend your mind and your perception of reality rather than try to muscle the spoon itself. The same concept can be applied to Neo's decision to rescue Morpheus.
That's why I have to go.
Why?
Because I believe in something.
What?
I believe I can bring him back.
This is really the first big step he takes to recognizing that he's the one. He learns to bend himself, not the world. He doesn't try to alter the circumstances surrounding Morpheus's abduction by the agents. He just changes his perception and comes to believe that he can save him, and thus it becomes possible for him to save him. Because if he knows it's possible, then how can it not be? The Oracle has led him down this path, of course, but he believes it's his free will that is directing him. And so he comes to also believe that he can change the Matrix and fulfill his rightful mandate to be the one. This idea about bending one's own mind to change reality can then be extended to death as well.
If you're killed in the Matrix, you die here?
The body cannot live without the mind.
People can die in the Matrix because their minds come to believe that they're dead. In other words, they choose to believe that they're dead. But what happens when someone bends their perception of the Matrix to believe that a dead person isn't dead? How can someone be dead who you know isn't dead? Shout out to 40K fans and long live the Emperor.
The Oracle told me that I would fall in love and that that man that I loved would be the one. So you see, you can't be dead.
Neo comes back to life because Trinity exercises her free will to decide to not believe that Neo is dead. And yet, the Oracle has forced her into this position because as an Oracle, she is inferred to be omnipotent and omniscient. And so by telling Trinity that she will fall in love with the One, as she falls in love with Neo, Neo can't be dead because the One can't die before he completes his mission. So at the same time Trinity makes a choice, she also doesn't make a choice. And the Oracle has effectuated all of this.
As soon as you step outside that door, you'll start feeling better. You'll remember you don't believe in any of this fake crap. You're in control of your own life.
Please tell me by now that you're coming to see the brilliant way in which the Wachowskis conflict free will with determinism in a way that makes them both viable concepts at the same time. If you believe you have free will, you have it. If you believe the world is real, it's real because your mind is in a state of surety. The Oracle makes Neo believe he has free will, and that's all she needs to attain her desired outcome.
I don't believe this is happening.
Neil, this has to be done.
This can't be just coincidence. It can't be.
What are you talking about?
The Oracle. She told me that I would have to make a choice.
How can you not love this film, you damn commies? Now, to just continue on this point for a little longer, how does the Oracle calculate that telling Neo that he's in control will lead him to do what she wants? Well, this is where her talents for psychological analysis, albeit a trait coded into her, come into play.
Do you believe in fate, Neo?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
One factor that she plugs into her calculation is that Neo is biased towards conclusions that indicate that he has free will. This quote, of course, also speaks to our larger idea here that people believe their reality is real and not a simulation because that's what they want to believe. Thus, they deem the Matrix a simulation and the real world not, despite the fact that the two consist of almost the exact same physical laws. We could, in theory, calculate back to a prime event, a first mover, if you will, and by doing so be able to explain every action that has ever occurred as an instance of predestination. But you made all those decisions, damn it! You made them! No one forced you! Gosh, this is confusing. There's this great moment in the film in which the free will versus fate debate is illustrated eloquently through the character of Cypher. While the other members of Morpheus's crew are in the Matrix, he's back on the ship going around pulling their plugs and thus killing them. But when he gets to Neo's plug, he becomes philosophical all of a sudden.
Morpheus was right. And there's no way I can pull this plug. I mean, if Neo's the one, then there'd have to be some kind of a miracle to stop me.
He knows that if this inevitable prophecy of the One is legitimate, and if Neo is indeed this being, then there's no way he's going to be able to pull his plug. But Before he can even give it a tug, Tank pops back up from his temporary incapacitation and kills Cypher with the lightning rifle. Is this a miracle that comes about due to fate's immutable advance? Or is it just Neo's luck that Tank comes to in time? If Cypher had been able to pull Neo's plug, would it have come out? Well, perhaps fate has a way of always making sure events along its path seem to be products of coincidence and choice. What's so genius about The Matrix is that we're purposely left to ponder which actions in its universe are the result of true free will and which are the result of the Oracle's influence. And as spoken to in this video, perhaps they're all the result of both at once.
You hear that, Mr. Anderson? That is the sound of inevitability.
Anyways, blah blah blah, you're living in a simulation, blah blah blah. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Definitely leave your comments down below. Looking forward to reading all of them. Remember to subscribe to this channel and hit that damn notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.